Hello, everybody. Dennis Allen with the Disciple Dilemma. Our episode today, discipleship is bigger, best, discipling in big and not as big churches. What's the value proposition for you? Well, frankly, can discipleship be done with excellence if it's in big, like big churches? And at the same time, can small and mid-sized churches fare any better? The spoiler to this is yes, if. Now you have to watch or listen to this episode to get that sentence framed in. But wow, do we have a killer guest today. Dr. Warren Bird. This guy's a pastor, a professor, an author, not just an author. This guy's written 34 books. He's led hundreds of journal and research efforts. He knows his stuff. Warren is the senior vice president for research at the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. But he's most known in the research arenas as a megachurch expert. He gets megachurch. He's well respected as a voice in organizational leadership, team formation, church mergers, church planting, growth, visioneering. And now in 2023, he's come out with another book, The Resilience Factor, a step-by-step guide to catalyze an unbreakable team. Now, that would be great all by itself, but teaming up with me today is Carmen LaBerge, the host of Mornings with Carmen, heard every weekday morning on Faith Radio Network. She's the author of Speak the Truth, How to Bring God Back into Every Conversation. And Carmen is a former CEO of a national nonprofit, and she's been a volunteer member of foundations and boards that make gifts to these nonprofits. She gets and appreciates the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. This isn't just a green eye shade deal. This is crucial for credibility, for integrity in the Christian community. Now, Carmen has served also in the past as a staff member, pastor of churches from micros to megas. You can connect with Carmen at carmenlaberge.com. We'll see her throughout the episode as well. This is an episode for leaders to listen to because we're going to talk about some of the core issues that bring obstacles to disciple making in churches, whether you're small, mid, or large. Here we go.
Well, all of these will be under the rubric of your book title, Dennis, The Disciple Dilemma, because all of this has to do with discipleship. First, let me use a case from yesterday's newspaper where it described a church with attendance of 5,000 and an online presence of 30,000. Now, what that 30,000 means, we don't know. Usually they don't know. Yeah. But it does speak to, you've got a sizable in-person contingent and an even larger, coming out of the pandemic, online connection at some point. And the question is, how are you making disciples? So have you figured out, or will you accept the challenge of cracking the nut of the people who are connecting online and asking, not just are they watching the sermons and all, but can we carry them much farther into discipleship?
Folks, welcome to the Disciple Dilemma. And like I said in the intro, we're talking with Dr. Warren Bird today, and we have a co-host with us who's got some horsepower too, Carmen LaBerge from Faith Radio. I want to just thank, first of all, Carmen, you for joining us again. Why would you come back? But thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's my privilege.
And Dr. Warren Bird, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today through your wonderful work as well. Thanks for being with us on the Disciple Dilemma.
Well, I am talking to someone who has worn such a variety of hats that this conversation could go a lot of different directions. So I'm looking forward to see how God leads us during this time.
This is the fun part with both of you, actually, when I think about this, because Carmen, her undergrad work was in business. You obviously, not only as a pastor and a professor, have been in the chair, as Carmen's been in the chair of a pastor, but you think and talk business. I love the stuff that you guys are talking about. And so as a business guy, I'm really excited about the chance for us to be able to exercise a lot of the traffic patterns that we want to go through today in this conversation about, is bigger best in the world of discipleship, the mega church, the mid-sized church, and the small church? I guess I need to start off, though, with a little bit of a warm-up on something. First of all, Warren, you have got to tell us, why do we need an Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability? We're all good people, right? We don't need that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll give you an example. My pastor, I'm part of a church that's a member accredited by the ECFA, Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, and he gave a tithing challenge, especially to people who were new to the church and new to the Christian life. And he said, if I'm reading you all right, you start with a skepticism, you distrust institutions, and you have a suspicion that you're not sure, even in a church, that the money will go where it says. I want to show you two things. First, I want to show you our latest audit. Yes, we get audited every year. A clean bill of health, no comments in the managerial section. And if that's not enough, the gold standard of how to do integrity right, of how to be above reproach, is set by the ECFA. And we follow their standards. And here's the seal, and he showed it. And you can have confidence that when you give, the money is really going to where you specify, where we promise, and used for the utmost care for kingdom good.
Can I add something that Warren may not say himself? So I have been a part of churches that are members of ECFA, and I have been involved in nonprofit organizations that are members of ECFA. And it is help that you don't know that you need until you need it, but it's real help when you need it. And there's just a lot of management that goes into managing a nonprofit and doing it well. And I'm not a fan of reading tax code, but ECFA every year reads that on our behalf and publishes for churches, nonprofits, like, how do you stay current with what's expected of you? I think even just like the clergy housing allowance is something that's super confusing to people, and they help you figure that out. And so anyway, it's a wonderful organization to be a part of in terms of becoming equipped. If you are not a church leader who has a business background, you need one, because churches and nonprofits are businesses.
I'm really curious how the senior vice president of research at the ECFA can write 34 books. I mean, Carmen, what do you think about somebody that writes 34 books?
I don't know. I wrote one and I'm still tired. I don't know.
Amen.
You do it slowly, carefully, and you make sure that you really think God's leading is in the writing of the book, because it's a lot of time to put together. It's then a lot of time to go out and speak about it. And of the writing of many books, there is no end. Someone wisely said long ago, and yet that was written in a book, a book that influences us to this day. So you have to weigh and say, is God in this? And if so, how can I use this as a tool to serve others so that the Great Commission will happen all the more?
Well, I realize this is sort of challenging, but would you tell us about your 34th book, Resiliency, you just put out? If you can remember that one out of all the others, can you tell us why you wrote Resiliency?
Yeah, I just was actually talking about it earlier today. And the challenge is, coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing, and we've been seeing, a move towards team leadership at the senior level in churches, in Christ-centered nonprofits. And I see this not only as a healthy thing, but it's a biblical thing. When you look at the book of Acts, you just see the modeling of the plurality of elders. If you need just one of many biblical foundations for it, the Trinity, God, three in one, works together to accomplish his good and his will. So this book digs into, okay, coming out of the pandemic, what does teaming look like? How do you build a team that's resilient in the sense of it's effective and unbreakable and able to handle whatever challenge, be it a pandemic, God forbid we have another, or anything else? It's so many teams, we're convinced, and we bring in a lot of research in this book, so many teams operate at a mediocre level. And they don't realize it, because that's pretty much all they've seen other teams do. And the same could be said of church boards or anything else. that we haven't seen stellar examples to go, oh, wow, a team could really be like that and function like that and have that level of trust and capacity stretching, and where everyone looks forward to being part of the gatherings. You can really do that? Yes, you can. And the book is designed to show you how.
Carmen, you've been in leadership roles where you've had teams with you. How do you see the concept of resiliency out there in the Christian space?
First of all, the word is super important. I think that COVID unmasked, one of the things that COVID unmasked would be all of those environments, churches, nonprofits, other entities where, they were just barely making it anyway. And so there was no bounce back to bounce. There was no bounce left in their bounce back. And so I think that coming to grips with that is hard for those places where that has to happen. But then in many environments, that does leave the opportunity to build a new kind of way forward. And so what does that look like? And so I think that one of the gifts of even just the language of resiliency, I think that we're seeing that language in discipleship when we talk about kids. That's the language you're going to hear from Awana in terms of what we're doing. We're building resilient disciples. That's language you're hearing there as well. It's certainly the language that we're hearing in youth ministry out of the Fuller Youth Institute. So I think it's good. I think it's timely, and we certainly, as maturing disciples, we need to recognize that, right, you're going to continue to get hit. It's going to come from all directions, and the question is whether or not you're going to bounce.
And Carmen, just to your point, I affirm the resiliency individual quality, and we're seeing a lot of emphasis on that. I think this is the only book written to Christians about resilience as a team.
That is awesome.
How do you do that as a group?
Yeah, and there, I assume that, Warren, what you're talking about is some interdependency, like how I both support and encourage the effectiveness of the person to the right of me and the left of me, not just me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Warren, your resume, which takes a long time to read, by the way, brother, I'm just saying. I mean, folks, if you go to Wikipedia and look up Warren Bird, I'm not normally a Wikipedia guy, but they've kept him current in there.
That's another way of saying I got a lot of gray hair and there's a few miles under here.
Well, I'm looking forward to you being able to solve a lot of the world's problems today on this podcast. So here's kind of the intro as we set this up. You have a lot of credentials in the area of megachurch. You've done a lot of thinking, you've done a lot of watching, you've done a lot of surveying in the megachurch. So I'm interested in setting something up for you, and I'd also like Carmen to respond to this after you have a chance to respond to it. I'd like to say that you've just been at the pulpit in a conference, and let's say there's 100 of the largest megachurch pastors in the U.S. sitting in that audience. They've been listening in rapt attention to you. And you just finished this presentation, and you're now at your close, your conclusion. You're getting ready to walk off. Would you tell us what you see as the challenges facing the megachurch for these pastors? If you wanted to haunt them with 1, 2, or 3 things, what's on your mind from what you've learned and seen about the challenges looking ahead for the megachurch?
Well, all of these will be under the rubric of your book title, Dennis, The Disciple Dilemma, because all of this has to do with discipleship. First, let me use a case from yesterday's newspaper where it described a church with attendance of 5,000 and an online presence of 30,000. Now, what that 30,000 means, we don't know. Usually they don't know. Yeah. But it does speak to, you've got a sizable in-person contingent and an even larger, coming out of the pandemic, online connection at some point. And the question is, how are you making disciples of this online group? Have you figured out how to take, one of the advantages of being a megachurch is you have a little more margin with your resources and a little more freedom to experiment and explore, which often is why the very large church and the very starting church, the other end of the spectrum, are the entrepreneurs, are the most experimental, innovative, and saying, let's try this, let's try that. So have you figured out, or will you accept the challenge of cracking the nut of the people who are connecting online and asking, not just are they watching the sermons and all, but can we carry them much farther into discipleship? How would we do that? What would digital discipleship look like for those who can't or want? And remember, the reach is now global. If I'm an English-speaking church, I can now, through the internet, reach English-speaking people anywhere in the world who may be in oppressive countries or anywhere else where they can't hear the gospel. How can I help them not just hear sermons, but go more steps and become disciples of Christ? I could say more about other aspects, but let me pause and see if Carmen wants to weigh in on that much.
100% agree. And then I think that the putting flesh on it is huge, right? Digital discipleship, in my view, falls short of the fullness of what it means to be a member of a body that is corporeal, right, that has flesh. And it falls short of a body in terms of activated in ministry, in mission together. And it falls short of the body in terms of having a family of faith and relearning and rediscovering maybe for the first time what it means to be a member of a family. So I'm definitely an analog church person when it comes to what it means. But I also recognize Warren is absolutely right. There's a whole lot of people who consider themselves Christians who are not physically engaged in the life of a local church. And so the definitional conversation is probably one we should have at some point. What does church even mean today?
And to carry that even further, those investigating the faith, it used to be you'd work up your nerve and go with a friend and sit in the back row of a church. Today, the front door is the internet. Very few people, Christians or not, visit a church without having checked it out online first. And that being the case, those who are checking out the faith for the first time, how can churches tailor what they're doing to that wooing, not only to our Lord, but to the corporate body, where you can't give a hug online. You can an awful lot of things that can't happen online. And to that huge crowd out there that research tells us are open to spirituality and they're looking on the internet for it. How can we help the Lord of the universe, the gospel of Jesus Christ, be the spot they find, land on, and embrace?
Would you two be in consensus on this statement then? We cannot exclusively rely on the digital in discipleship, but we must not overlook that the digital is the direction people are going to look in probably before they ever show up and try to get into the longer walk of discipleship. Would you both be good with that, or is there some pushback?
I would agree, but I'd add a third component of the back and forth. My wife and I recently led a young marrieds group, and we did an in-person kickoff, but then a bunch of nights were at 8:00. You plop your last kid in bed, you plop down on the sofa next to each other, you do the Bible study and prayer and discussion, and you didn't have to fool with a sitter, with driving anywhere. And then we had a happily ever married party at the very end. But that back and forth is what churches are figuring out. How do we do the digital so well that there's no loss of quality in terms of the discipleship thrust that's happening?
Yeah, I would concur 100%. And I love that you brought up that component as well. That is the experience that I have as well. There is an in-person necessity to establish relationship, but the course can 100% happen via Zoom or Teams or whatever works for you. And then people don't have to leave their home. You don't have to organize childcare or anything else. People can, even when they're traveling, they can still participate. It's great. And I love that you had a happily ever after event at the end. I just think that's just awesome. So I think, Dennis, you must have very, very high quality digital components to what you're doing, or you're just going to be written off. Like, people aren't even going to come and see because you did not let them have the window in that they expect to have today. And so I think digital is absolutely necessary, but I don't think it can be the only thing you're offering.
Dennis, you're talking about megachurches. I just want to put a parenthesis. I'm on the board. I've been on the board of a megachurch, but the church I'm talking about is a small church plant. Anybody can get a Zoom account and do what we did. That is not size specific.
I mean, they gave Dennis a Zoom account, so clearly.
I want to thank Warren Bird, because Dr. Warren Bird, you have contributed magnificently from subjects ranging from church mergers, growth, leadership, resilient factor. My goodness, the resilience factor, right? The resilience factor in a fragile world. How fabulous. Thank you for what you've done there. My takeaway is just, Warren, thank you for being with us today on the Disciple Dilemma.
You're welcome. The delight and what you're honing in on is something that from now until Jesus comes, the issue that we have to keep coming back to.
And Carmen, thank you so much for being with us today, co-hosting this thing and putting a little polish on my side.
It's so much fun. Thank you for the invitation.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipledilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.